There's a lot going on in UAP news right now. There was a briefing with the Congress where Lou Elizondo was there, Eric Davis was there. He mentioned 4 different kinds of alien species and gave a lot of background information on the legacy crash retrieval programs and all that's been going on in secret without congressional oversight, just furthering this movement towards more transparency. There was a new whistleblower who came forward on the Weaponized podcast, and I did a whole breakdown of that on Shock's Talks. That was Matthew Brown, and Immaculate Constellation was the program that he spoke about. And there's been some really good conversations going on around experiencers. Cosmosis podcast by Kelly Chase and J. Christopher King just released a really thoughtful, very interesting episode about how to listen to experiencers in order to best understand the phenomena. And they refer to a paper that was written by Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis, who was just recently in that congressional briefing. And that paper has a 6-layer model for analyzing and interpreting experiences. So we're going to get into all of that and more today. But the main topic of today's episode is going to be John Mack, because I just finished reading Abduction. It was like a 400 and some page book. It took me a long time to get through, and I'm really excited to share some notes with you. So welcome back to Shock's Talks. I'm Shakti, and as always, all of the links for everything I'm going to talk about today are going to be at the bottom of your description box below this episode. And I spend a lot of time reading, researching, listening, watching, and gathering information because I just really love this topic and I love learning about it. So if you are like me and you love learning about anomalous phenomena, consciousness, remote viewing, aliens, UFOs, UAP, the history, who to listen to, who to watch, what channels to pay attention to, if you care a lot about civil rights and all of humanity progressing in a positive way, and if you want the truth to be accessible to all, known to all, and to end the secrecy and the hoarding of science and information by the elite few who have the power and control over the many, well then you're in the right place, and I hope that you will like, share, and subscribe to help me grow my channel, because I'm working really hard to do all of this outside of my 9-to-5 job that I work. So anyway, let's get into John Mack. All right, so here's some stuff from the book jacket cover. Just a little, I liked how they broke it down here. The subject of the book, Human Encounters with Aliens. The author, John E. Mack, MD, Pulitzer Prize-winning Harvard psychiatrist on the front lines of abductee research. And then, sorry, I keep feeling like I'm going to sneeze, so it might happen. It usually does. I have a lot of allergy stuff almost all the time because I live in the desert and things are blowing around here. So the contents, 13 in-depth case histories of alien abductions, Dr. John Mack's clients, none of whose experiences are attributable to mental illness. Provide details of alien encounters reported in no previous book on UFOs. So that's a little bit about what this book has inside of it. John Mack has investigated close to 100 cases of alien abduction and conducted hundreds of hours of interviews and treatment. He studied under Bud Hopkins, and some other people have come out of Bud Hopkins also who have carried on this work. What's his name? David Jacobs is another one, and I've covered him on some Shock's Talks episodes, which I've included in the links below. So John Mack was born in 1929 and he died in 2004. An American psychiatrist, writer, and professor of psychiatry, he served as the head of the Department of Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School from 1977 to 2004. In 1977, Mack won the Pulitzer Prize for his book, A Prince of Our Disorder, on T.E. Lawrence. So obviously this is an educated, well-established psychiatrist who comes from an academic background as well. He was born in New York City to an academic German Jewish family, graduated from the Horace Mann Lincoln School in 1947 and Phi Beta Kappa from Oberlin in 1951, and received his medical doctorate degree cum laude from Harvard Medical School in 1955. Mack subsequently interned at the Massachusetts General Hospital and trained as a psychiatrist at the Massachusetts Mental Health Center. These are some facts from Wikipedia. In 1959, Mack joined the United States Air Force, which I never knew, so that's why I put that in here because I thought that was really interesting, serving as a medic in Japan, where he rose to the rank of captain. In 1961, he returned from military service in Japan, continuing at the Massachusetts Mental Health Center and Boston Psychoanalytic Society and Institute, receiving certification in child and adult psychoanalysis and psychotherapy. In 1964, Mack returned to Harvard Medical School, becoming a full professor at Harvard in 1972. In 1977, he became the chairman of the Executive Committee of Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, which he stayed in that position until his death in 2004. So the death was actually a car accident, a drunk driver. I don't know if I put that in my notes, but I read that he was in London and was hit by a drunk driver. So that was 2004. And there are a lot of other interesting facts on Wikipedia. I'm not going to read you out everything that's on there, but he was kind of an activist, and he was very much interested in just moving towards peace and away from nuclear destruction, which is also a theme of a lot of the UFO people, I guess, people who have had contact. So I wonder if there's something there, like that certain souls who have certain alignments, interests, and intentions maybe gain access to this anomalous stuff for a reason. I don't know. So then, anyway, the alien abduction research began in the 90s, and I linked a video below, which is, let's see what it's called, so you can just skim through. It's 1999, Dr. John Mack entering the heart of the alien mystery. And I linked this video because it's just really cool to hear someone talk and see who they are. So I do recommend watching a little bit of that, even if you don't have time to watch all of it. To me, John Mack is like the Don Draper of ufology, not in personality, but like he's just like this good-looking, put-together guy from this era, and he's so smart and seems to be genuinely kind in his treatment of his patients. He was someone who interviewed all of the kids that were a part of that Rua, Zimbabwe aerial school sighting, which was a mass sighting that occurred. He was involved in that in terms of analyzing and interpreting those stories that came from those kids at the time. And he is very eloquent and thoughtful, and the way that he compiles the data and then is able to synthesize and analyze and summarize is just really a reflection of his academic approach and his academic background. So you're getting like very high quality research. And the book, that's why it took me so long to get through it. The book has 13 of these 100 or so cases, and each case is so detailed, and you're hearing all about what these people went through, and then you get a little breakdown after each case where he kind of reflects on what that case meant to him and why he included it in this book. And there's like some really nice setup at the beginning of the book where he introduces things to kind of get your mind framework ready to read these stories, and then in the end some more really nice conclusions. So here are some bullet points from the video first, and then we'll get into my notes from the book. So from the video, he talks about how the power of this phenomenon lies much more in the fact that these experiences are occurring in people who have no reason to be reporting these things all around the world, and it is a genuine mystery. That's what drew him in, because he was skeptical at first, like most people who end up seriously researching this topic. He says that all of the theories need to take in the whole big picture. And he's talking about like people who have consciousness theories or theories of what's going on with anomalous phenomena. Basically that many approach these things through one facet, but really you have to look at the whole big picture. And I think he's also referring to the fact that a lot of people disregard the experiencer part of this phenomenon because it's so messy and uncomfortable. And that's exactly what J. Christopher King and Kelly Chase are talking about on this Cosmosis podcast episode that I linked below. And it's so interesting, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too. He says that our ideologies very much shape what we can take in, and then there's a part in the video where the lights are like flickering on and off, and he kind of comments about how in a very and this is a cool part to see how he reacts to this. The audience is kind of laughing like, oh, the aliens are coming to abduct us, and he's like, very seriously, like, yeah, this kind of thing happens a lot when you're talking about this kind of stuff. Fluky energy things that happen. And so that was just a little interesting moment. And you see this happen a lot when people are talking about these things. I wonder if it's a little bit of a confirmation or something, or a little winking or blinking from the universe. I don't know. There's something to it. He says that when people would ask, why are you interested in this stuff? His response was always, how can you not be? Which, come on, like, we all feel that way, right? If you're here, you probably feel that way. Like, this is the most important thing. This touches all of humanity and possibly other dimensions and other planets and other universes even. Like, how can you not be thinking about this? I mean, I personally literally wake up every single day thinking about this stuff, and it's only grown more and more interesting to me as time has gone on. So that's something I have in common with John Mack. And then he kind of goes into like some of the issues, like how, you know, we have this worldview that says these things can't happen, they're not possible, and that's a big problem. And he talks about basically how once you get into it and you start hearing things that don't make sense, you have a choice. You either try to force it into the worldview that you have, like some people say like, oh, these things are all just sleep paralysis and that's what that is, and people are just crazy, or people are just dreaming, and da-da-da-da. And then you find out that, well, a lot of these stories happen when people are awake and they're not paralyzed and they're not crazy because they're being analyzed like clinically and they're fine, you know. So that's one thing that you're dealing with when it comes to this stuff. And for him personally, he chose to just start shifting his worldview. He says a lot of people bring up this Stockholm syndrome when it comes to the loving relationships that people end up forming with their captors in a way, because even though abductions are very traumatic, a lot of times they end up resulting in these deep bonds and these emotional connections with this non-human intelligence or these entities or visitors or aliens. And he thinks it's something more than that. He thinks that, while that's an interesting lens to view it through, and it's one that is probably worth considering, there also does seem to be some kind of spiritual connection, sometimes erotic, and some kind of transcendent power is brought into the creature connection that occurs here. So you'll learn through reading these stories that there is a kind of sexual and erotic nature to many contact and abduction situations, but there's also this ongoing hybridization program that is probable based on all of the stories of people who have been abducted. So there's something going on there, but it also includes certain humans having I guess you could say, alien partner, or I don't know, it's not their partner, but it's like the being that they have hybrid children with. So those beings, they have these really deep, special bonds with sometimes. I know it just sounds so crazy, but again, there are hundreds and hundreds of these stories coming in from people who are living all kinds of different lives, and they share these common themes. Sometimes these relationships can be so powerful that they actually threaten marriages. I think we can all imagine how that would be possible. Like, you can feel when someone you love is pulling away because they're developing a connection with someone else. Imagine if they're developing a connection with a non-human entity. Like, how weird and how destructive that could be to a partnership. But some people have learned to navigate this, and Whitley Strieber is an example. He mentions how him and his wife have agreed that things that happen in other dimensions are okay by them, and they still stay together. Whitley talks a lot about this too. So, and I'm starting to read Communion now, and it's so good. I can't believe I waited this long. It's like way better than I even expected. He's an incredible writer. So anyway, the aliens seem to be fascinated with our physicality, our sensuality, our sexuality, and it's as if they long for a body. They want that, they miss that. At the same time, this non-egoic existence, and I'm quoting John Mack here, sometimes I forget to say it when I start, this non-egoic existence, the understanding of the interconnectedness of life, they teach us that. So he's saying that he kind of calls it like an exchange program. He says there's something about an expectation or a demand that human relationships have a pureness or non-aggressive quality. There's a lack of tolerance that many experiencers feel. It has to be different than that. There's something there that influences relationships on this plane. So he's basically talking about how this is a kind of awakening process that leads to people needing connection to be more pure. And it's a kind of reaching to us from the beyond. Quote, an outreach program from the cosmos to the consciously impaired. And everyone's laughing at that in the video, of course. So I'm gonna skim down through these notes so I can keep it moving, but that video is really good. I want to go to his kind of conclusion of that talk that he's giving. The phenomenon at its root and other paranormal experiences. He said, what this is all about is a heart opening, a desperate crisis of heart opening, a re-ensoulment. Out of this, the earth once again becomes sacred. This destructive, annihilating way becomes impossible. The way we treat the planet becomes impossible. To me, this is the same message that we hear from obviously so many spiritual leaders and teachers and mystics and, psychics, and Tom Campbell is saying this same thing with his theory of reality and this idea that ultimately as we evolve individually, our consciousness raises to a level where it becomes impossible to be so harmful because we understand the consequences, but not in a fearful way. We just care at that point. We get it. We see each other as one. We see the connection. We see the planet as something worth loving and caring for and tending to. We need to be the stewards of this place that we inhabit, and that it's all alive and interconnected. So really that's what John Mack ends up thinking as a result of all the work he did with abductees, which is beautiful. He said the primary responsibility is the stewardship of the earth, the caretaking of this home, the planet of choice. He quotes Thomas Berry, a radical Catholic theologian, and this person said, as far as we know, like as far as we have evidence, this planet is the finest creation of the divine. And that's how he ends his talk here. So some really interesting things just to give you a sense of like what kind of person this is and where he's coming from. So Abduction was published in 1994. It's dedicated to Bud Hopkins. And I just typed up a lot of different quotes from that book that I want to read you here. So the first one is just from the introduction. In all of these experiential realms, the individual's ordinary consciousness is radically transformed. He or she is initiated into a non-ordinary state of being, which results, ultimately, in a reintegration of the self, an immersion or entrenchment into states and or knowledge not previously accessible. He does reference shamanic cultures and how shamans go through initiatory experiences that allow them to then bring valuable knowledge from the other sides or the other side or the other dimensions or whatever those non-physical places are. They're able to then bring back things that are of value to the people, to the land, to the world that they exist in here. And he's comparing these experiences to that in some way. In a section titled "Who Are the Abductees?", Mack says, none of the efforts to characterize abductees as a group have been successful. They seem to come, as if at random, from all parts of society. My own sample includes students, housewives, secretaries, writers, business people, computer industry professionals, musicians, psychologists, a nightclub receptionist, a prison guard, an acupuncturist, a social worker, and a gas station attendant. So he's kind of trying to let us know how different all these people are, and they're not connected to each other, and there's no easy way to say that, oh, these are the people who are abductees or contactees or experiencers. It's this group. That's not a thing. Like when some people might talk like that is or act like it is, but he's saying based on his research, that is not the case. Another quote from this section of the book: I have the impression that abductees as a group are unusually open and intuitive individuals, less tolerant than usual of societal authoritarianism, and more flexible in accepting diversity and the unusual experiences of other people. Sound like these abductees are pretty cool, if you ask me. Some of my cases report a variety of psychic experiences, which has been noted by other researchers. So this is also something that comes up in this latest Cosmosis episode. They talk about how many experiencers are not just UFO or abduction experiencers, but they may have also had psychic experiences, other telepathic experiences, precognitive dreams, poltergeist activity. They might have healing abilities, or they've just seen other weird paranormal stuff or experienced it. So because of that, it feels very messy and complicated, and people can write it off and say like, like stay in your lane. Like, did you see a UFO, or are you a telepathic psychic, or did you blah, 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 and it's like, the truth is a lot of the people having these things are having all the things. So it's weird, but it is the way that it is. Another quote from his book, Abduction: "There is not a single abduction case in my experience or that of other investigators that has turned out to have masked a history of sexual abuse or any other traumatic cause." Now, I included this part here because that's something a lot of people will say in that kind of debunking kind of way, like, oh, it's just you had some other trauma and you imagined that it was this. He's saying, no, that's not the case. Not a single case has been that. And remember, he did hundreds of these. And other researchers, he refers to David Jacobs here, that is saying the same thing. Professionally, in our professional opinions, like, that's not what was going on. But the reverse has frequently occurred, that an abduction history has been revealed in cases investigated for sexual or other traumatic abuse. Sexual abuse appears to be one of the forms of human woundedness that, at least from the experiencer's standpoint, has led the aliens to intervene in a protective or healing manner. A 35-year-old woman, for example, remembered consciously being sexually abused by her father at age 4 and weeping in the cellar afterwards. Several familiar alien beings she recalled encounters from 14 months old. So they were familiar because she had had multiple encounters. This is a quote from her: "Checked me to see if I was hurt, because I did hurt. They found underwear for her, not the right ones." And like a little quirky thing that happens a lot is like they don't really know what's going on and what's right or wrong in human stuff. So they like try to do something, but it's a little bit off. So that's like one of those details here. And they did up her sandals for her. So it's almost like they were tending to her. They were checking on her, and then they were kind of getting her back up on her feet. Just a very interesting little detail that you don't hear about stuff like that all the time. Often the aliens are protectors in early childhood, but the encounters become more serious and disturbing as the child approaches puberty. Now, this is all very interesting as I'm getting into Whitley Strieber's book, Communion, because in his latest introduction to the book, he talks a lot about how he was terrified when he first had his first encounter that he remembered, and the abduction, he was screaming. He felt like a wild caged animal. He felt violated. He felt like they had taken him and just, he used the R word, which I don't even know if I can use on this platform, but when someone completely physically overtakes you against your will, is what it felt like to him, because they were doing all kinds of medical examinations, and including the classic probes that go places you don't want them to go and things like that. So at that time, he felt completely traumatized. This happened when he was an adult, but now in his life, he has such a deep connection with these visitors that he describes it as almost heavenly. So it's a very crazy thing, but that's often the case with these stories. There's Chris Bledsoe's another great example. His story is scary when you read it, and he's like this kind of divine being now. Like, his energy and his presence is very peaceful and content. He's become so inspired by this phenomena. He feels healed and helped and protected, and so it's a very complex situation that we're dealing with, but a story arc that has emerged among so many experiencers is this trauma to acceptance to inspiration to motivation kind of arc. This is a common theme. Some more bullet points. Abductions run in families, sometimes 3 or more generations. Some symptoms that are tied to unconscious association with particular elements of the abduction experiences include a general sense of vulnerability, especially at night, fear of hospitals, fear of flying, of elevators, animals, insects, and sexual contact. Particular sounds, smells, images, or activities that are disturbing for no apparent reason may later prove to be connected with the abduction experience. insomnia, fear of the dark, and of being alone at night, the covering of windows against intruders, sleeping with the light on as an adult, and disturbing dreams and nightmares of being in strange flying craft or enclosures. Some other things that are associated, and all of these things are just, they're associated. They're not like if you have this, you had an abduction experience, or if you had an abduction experience, you definitely had all of these things. No, that's not what they're saying. They're just saying these are things that do happen frequently in conjunction with these stories of abduction. Odd rashes, cuts, scoop marks, or other lesions may appear overnight, or unexplained bleeding may occur from the nose, ear, or rectum. Sinus pain, urological, gynecological complaints, unexplained difficulties during pregnancy, and persistent gastrointestinal symptoms. Where do these things happen? Usually abductions begin in homes or while someone is driving. People are often floated, that's the term they use, and they are astounded to find that they can pass through solid objects during these experiences. There is often a beam of light that may serve as some kind of ramp for transitioning the abductee from place to place, and they're usually taken from the road or the home or the car to a vehicle, to a craft, a ship, something that is waiting nearby. And sometimes they feel numb or paralyzed in their bodies when this is happening, but not always. He gives examples of abduction stories where people who are taken are actually missing, like from their home, and other people notice that they're missing and are looking for them for a certain amount of time, and then they return. So it's not just a dream-like out-of-body thing. Sometimes the whole body is gone, which is very interesting. Also, there is often independent observation of a UFO near where an experiencer reports that an abduction took place. So just to be clear, that means if I came to you tomorrow and said I was abducted from my house last night at 8:07 p.m., and separately from me, 5 of my neighbors happen to come to you and say, I saw this weird thing in the sky, and they each say it independently, or even if just one of them did. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about here. Sometimes there are multiple sightings of a UFO that seem to happen at the same time and place as the abduction story, and they're separate reports from different people. Abductees experience the insides of these ships and have explanations of how it looks, feels, and smells. There's so many interesting details about smell in a lot of these different stories. There are multiple rooms, and they are often taken to procedure rooms that are brightly lit with a hazy luminosity from indirect light sources on the walls. The walls and ceilings are curved and appear to be white. The floors are often dark or black. Computer-like consoles and other equipment and instruments line the sides of the rooms, which may have balconies and various levels and alcoves. Furniture is sparse, limited, generally to body-conforming chairs and tables with a single support stand that can tilt one way or another during the procedures. The vibe or the ambiance is sterile, cold, mechanistic, and hospital-like, except when some sort of more complex staging occurs. And there are so many interesting, weird stories of these like staged events, especially in David Jacobs' work. The beings observed include, also Yvonne Smith. I've picked up on some of those from her work too. The beings observed include several sorts. So we have tall or short luminous entities that may be translucent or at least not altogether solid, reptilians, human-looking helpers, small grays, and tall grays. And this is very interesting because in this congressional briefing that just occurred a couple of days ago, Eric Davis, an astrophysicist who's been deeply involved in this stuff for a long time and is pretty famous in the UFO history world. He mentions the types of beings that are pretty well known in front of the Congress. And he mentions Nordics, which are like the human looking ones, reptilians, greys, and insectoids, or insectolins as some others call them. Now, he makes the distinction that the reptilians and the insectoids are not actually reptiles or bugs, but they have certain characteristics that match our understanding of those creature categories. And so we've kind of given them those names, but that's not a true descriptor of what they are. We don't know what they are. Some abductees have seen an eye behind the eye, suggesting that the large black eye that we typically see depicted is more like a goggle or a lens. And this is interesting to me too, because Whitley Strieber's book Communion has that classic alien face with the black eyes, and his newest book, and he's written tons of books, but the one that I'm really interested in is called The Fourth Mind, where he gives his breakdown of the understanding of what these things really are. And on the cover of that book, you see the same Communion alien classic face, which really like triggered so many people, but also initiated the recall of a lot of abduction experiences. So you see that face, and it has a different eye. It has like a bluish gray silvery eye with a pupil, like a human, almost animal human looking eye. So it's just interesting, that reveal, you know, because for so long nobody was talking about that aspect of it, but more and more you hear little things about this, that these black eyes may be some kind of covering. So the major procedures that occur in abductions are broken down into two major categories: physical and informational. The physical stuff includes a lot of sample taking, being penetrated by instruments all over the body, like every hole and every part of you and through the skin and all the other stuff. And then there's like the whole reproductive, maybe hybridization aspect of all of this. A lot of, like reproductive materials being taken. The informational part has more to do with connecting with the hybrid children. So again, quoting John Mack here, in sum, the purely physical or biological aspect of the abduction phenomenon seems to have to do with some sort of genetic or quasi-genetic engineering for the purpose of creating human-alien hybrid offspring. All right, there you go. So in this Cosmosis video that I've been talking about, they get into this idea of redaction and how redaction doesn't just happen when someone else is telling your story or when things are getting published and things are redacted, but we redact ourselves. I never thought of it like this. So this is coming from J. Christopher King and Kelly Chase. And they're talking about adjusting stories based on who you're telling them to. And this really, really resonated with me because I've intuited this for a long time. And I started thinking about it back in 2010-11 when I was thinking a lot about the special space that needs to be created in order for an artist to share their creation. So like the sanctity of an open mic, for example, and the difference between feeling like you have to prove something or I don't know, like there's a certain energy on certain stages, but then there's these certain spaces that exist where there's such a loving, open energy that it allows something more beautiful to come through. And I was just having this personal experience where I felt like, and maybe you relate to this if you're an artist of any kind. I'm an artist of all kinds. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, sculptor, painter. I dance, I sing, I write music. I've done kind of it all. I did theater. I studied theater for a long time. So I love to I love to participate in all the arts, and I do feel like there's something very magical that I learned how to provide for people, which is this special audience attention that I could create for them in order to allow them to give me the best of what they had. It's a very different vibe than show me what you got and I'm going to judge you. You know what I mean? So, anyway, let that seed be planted and we can talk more about that later. But I think there's something magical there that really relates to this experience or story thing that these two are talking about. They're saying that, first of all, it's crucial to document these stories as accurately as possible, and it's best to hear it directly from the experiencer. And in order to get the best story, you have to be someone that they can trust, and you have to come to them with compassion, but also with an educated view. Like, you have to have enough knowledge and understanding that they can freely tell you more of the details, more of the weird details, you know, because the truth is, if you have a weird experience and you're telling someone that has no idea about any of this stuff, just in a practical sense, you have to stop and explain everything and give context for all this weird stuff. So being educated in all of this and coming at experiencers with compassion and openness is going to create a space that allows them to tell you more than they would tell someone else. And this isn't because they're like sketchy, it's because they're human. This is a point that they make in the podcast. So Kelly Chase brings up this point that like the weirdest parts of the story are often what get discarded first, and that's the stuff we need to look at. Those might be the keys to understanding. And then they bring up this paper. And again, we're talking about Eric Davis again and Jacques Vallée this time. They wrote this paper, Incommensurability, Orthodoxy, and the Physics of High Strangeness, a 6-layer model for anomalous phenomena. And skimming down. Oh. Let's see. Because this is where I inserted all my notes on the briefing, but I already talked about it earlier. So let's get into these 6 layers and then we're going to wrap it up. So the 6 layers from this paper are, Kelly makes the point that they are both distinct and overlapping layers. And I see, they call it layers, Eric Davis and Jacques Vallée, but I see it as a lens, but it's a multifaceted lens in a way. So we have to view these stories through all of these overlapping lens layers in order to really understand it. Can't just go through one, can't leave out the uncomfortable weird ones, can't disregard what's messy and doesn't fit into our worldview. We've got to grow. We've got to expand. We have to open our minds and accept that reality is more than what we've been taught to believe that it is. So the layers are physical, number 1, which is the nuts and bolts, like physical evidence, the way that these UAP act like a real tangible object. For example, leaving indentations in the ground or radiation that can be measured in the site where it landed, things like that. Then you have the anti-physical. This is the part that makes no sense because it's violating known laws of physics. And that's kind of like the 5 observables or all the anomalous behavior of UAP. The way they phase in and out of different mediums and materials, the way that they bop around in the sky in ways that are unexplainable, the way they just take off with no visible propulsion, or they don't have to accelerate in a way that our technology does. They just instantly zip to the next location, like seemingly breaking the laws of physics. And then you have the psychological, which is how human perception interacts with the phenomena. And Kelly brings up the dreamlike quality, the cognitive dissonance. Next, you have physiological. That's kind of like all those burns and rashes and scoop marks and implants and different things that can happen to the human body. Sometimes it's a healing, a miraculous healing. And then you have the psychic layer, and that's the telepathy, the mind-to-mind communication, poltergeist activity sometimes, levitation, precognitive dreams, anticipating. Sometimes people feel like the beings are just anticipating their next thought before they even think it. And then also spontaneous healings are under this category. Oh, I'm getting too dry of a throat right at the end. And then cultural. I can't re-record now. 45 minutes in. The cultural is the way these encounters shape and are shaped by society. Okay, I'm gonna have to wrap it up because I need to drink some hot tea. We covered a lot today. I'm going to be talking more in the next couple episodes about more of the news, what's going on with all the UAP stuff that's happening. There's a lot. And I'm also going to start talking more about more of this experiencer stuff, especially deep diving into a famous experiencer, Whitley Strieber, and the books he's written on this topic. Whew. All right, time for some tea. Thank you guys so much for making it all the way through. Thanks for being with me on Shocks Talks. I really appreciate your support, your interest in this topic, and let's just keep learning together. The truth is out there, but it's also in here. We are able to access knowledge. We have direct connection to consciousness and all of creation. So that's what I'm about, and I'll see you next time on Shocks Talks.